Greetings, fellow adventurers, and welcome to the Couple of Nerds podcast. I'm DnDWife, the creator of DnDWifeStories.com, and your co-host. Joining me is the man behind the screen, my brilliant dungeon master, and also my husband, Eguile. Say hi, Eguile.
Hey everyone, excited to be here sharing our nerdy adventures with all of you.
Absolutely. So what's Couple of Nerds all about? Well, we're diving into the realms of Extraeus, sharing our experiences, playing D&D in our apartment, and exploring the intricate tapestry of relationships both in and out of the game.
And we got some exciting segments for you all, from lore deep dives to crafting tips, artwork showcases, and relationship advice on and off the table. We've got a little bit of everything for every kind of adventurer.
So whether you're a seasoned adventurer or a tabletop newbie, we invite you to join us today. Tune in, relax, and enjoy the magic of Couple of Nerds. May your rolls be natural 20s and your adventures be legendary. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Couple of Nerds. I'm your host, DnDWife, and with me is my co-host, Dungeon Master and husband, Eguile.
What's going on, everyone?
welcome to another insightful episode where this time it's going to be our Heard It From Us segment where we kind of tackle some of the hot button issues of today's TTRPG sphere.
Yeah, it's also where we take a deep dive into a lot of the kind of more sensitive subject matters that other tables face. And then we kind of give our side and kind of more of the experiences that we've had in the hopes that maybe it'll help them get through some of the struggles that they might have later on.
Yeah, and it shows you you're not alone, that there's other people out there who understand what you're going through or have gone through similar things.
Oh, yeah. And especially with tonight's topic, it's a very, very big one, I think, with a lot of different tables, as well as kind of one of the big no-nos that I think not many people actually want to do.
Yeah, we are talking about player versus player, PvP in TTRPGs. That's a mouthful.
Oh, I know, right? It's a lot to go on. And just as it is a mouthful, there's so much nuance to the idea of PvP within the tabletop community.
Oh, yeah. There's different types of PvP. There's not just like a basic blanket term for all of them.
Yeah, there's not really like a one-size-catch-all for PvP when it comes to tabletop gaming, and that sometimes you hear that and you automatically think everyone is just stabbing each other behind the back and finding any ways to kill their fellow player. But there's a lot of kind of freedom to PvP. And I think that's really what needs to be looked at sometimes.
So we're going to be covering some of those differences. We're going to be talking about which one of them, I guess, is acceptable versus not acceptable in certain tables. And so, yeah, we'd like to encourage you guys, whoever's listening out there, to engage with the podcast. Let us know what you think by liking, reviewing, and hopefully subscribing to the podcast. We really appreciate it. And let us know what you think about PvP.
Yeah, and then also be sure if you have any other kind of issues or topics that you might be facing, send them our way. Let us see if maybe we've dealt with it and maybe can have kind of some of the answers that we've come up with that could help you in those tough situations.
Absolutely.
But in terms of PvP, I think really what comes down to is understanding exactly what do we mean by PvP in a tabletop setting.
Yeah, is it just, any player interaction besides dialogue is PvP?
I mean, as a DM, I think I have kind of a unique perspective on PvP in that it kind of has like multiple facets. And that when you hear PvP, it just really means like, is there this veil that kind of keeps this idea that, okay, the party, this group of players, they're a group that are supposed to be a team. Yeah. So they really shouldn't, like in most games, you shouldn't be able just to hurt a teammate.
Right. Friendly fire can be turned off.
You turn friendly fire off. And so the idea is that, it actually has more context to it because there's the idea of attacking, but there's so much more that you can do to your fellow players that isn't necessarily like slicing their throat or, leaving them to hang and die.
No.
So there's a lot more to it. So by just simply going, absolutely no PvP kind of starts to really minimize what exactly PvP is.
Yeah, and on the other hand, sometimes it gets a bad connotation because of other games like video games, that have a sort of negative response towards PvP. And so that kind of translates sometimes and makes people afraid to engage in it as well.
Yeah, and I think that's really what it comes down to, too, is that it's more of a societal thing and kind of that concept of of both that competitive drive to win and be the best, as well as kind of that more of the freedom to do whatever you wish to do. And so that's kind of a big thing to look at when it comes to PvP and how you evaluate and how you define it within your game. Because the big thing is that PvP can be defined every single different table, right? So I think that's really what it comes down first, is more of just kind of figuring out exactly how each person defines PvP at their table. So like for us, we really view it as, obviously, when it comes to kind of like player on player combat, it's not necessarily encouraged or discouraged. It's just a facet of the story.
Yeah, we like to let, if it is going to happen that somebody attacks somebody else in the party, it should be natural. It should be a natural progression of the story or a consequence of something. It shouldn't just be because.
Oh, yeah. And so that way it kind of plays in more, because the idea then is that, look, you have that freedom. And if something were to be like this crazed emotional moment, you wouldn't want to stop and go, okay, well, there's this invisible force field, so I can't necessarily do anything to this person that has necessarily harmed me in a way. And that can kind of sometimes pull you out of the immersion. And for my table, I really want to go for this immersion where people feel like they're there. They're feeling that everything's going on. And so just like in our world where we have crimes of passion, why wouldn't my table have the same thing?
Right. You know, we can all get frustrated in the moment and do something we regret later. And I think it's all part of an enriching sort of the story. You know, when we make mistakes, when we fumble, those are kind of like the little flavor bits in the story that show us that we're all human. We're all just struggling to get along, even in a fantasy world.
Oh yeah, and that's kind of the big thing. And I think when, like, we were talking societal and you were talking about video games, I think that's where a lot of that kind of misnomer and the negative comes from, because you know, in video game culture, which, you know, we play a lot of, but we tend to stay away from those kind of games, because we mostly play, like, you know, the online multiplayer games and stuff like that. We used to play League of Legends a lot, so the PvP aspect from us was always kind of this more punishment style. You know, I grew up playing a lot of World of Warcraft, so there was always spawn camping, and they were there to ruin your game. So it was always viewed negatively. But there are other games where that's the entire concept. I mean, the entire Fortnite and all that kind of battle royale
They're built
style,
on that style.
That's all it is. So obviously PvP isn't this necessarily like evil amongst evils.
No.
It's more of just, there are certain people that enjoy it, and then there are certain people that's not a facet they're looking for.
Yes, exactly.
But video games, it kind of really determines what you play, really determines kind of how you view video games. If you're a big Fortnite, Call of Duty, that kind of thing, you might not necessarily say, no, we should allow PvP. But if you've had more of, like, you know, a League of Legends experience, or, you know, you got, you know, spawn camped or something, you might yourself go, no, absolutely not in my stories, never. But there's never it's never wrong. There's never one true right way or wrong way. It's just more of ensuring that you have everyone on the same page.
That everyone's on board, and if they're not, then, you know, discuss it and act accordingly.
And really also when it comes to the TTRPG community themselves, they're really not on board either. And there's kind of this mix of going on, obviously, you know, that they have their own voice. And I believe we took some polls.
Yes, we did a poll on X. We got quite a bit of engagement. So the question was, do you allow PvP in your tabletop game? And it was surprising what we saw. So we allowed 3 separate options. The first was yes, all PvP allowed. Then second was no, none allowed. And the third was only stealing allowed, because sometimes there is that sort of mix. And it's interesting. 56% said no, none allowed. And I think that is because they just, it's so worrisome, right, to try and get into PvP and then accidentally make someone upset at you in real life because of something that happened. And so that fear is there, and people don't really want to touch it too much.
Yeah, I also think there's another mechanic when it comes to gaming, especially in the TTRPG, is that because the player characters themselves are so powerful, that's also that fear too, you know. So that plays into a lot of people, like, I don't even want to challenge that,
right? Like, I don't want to accidentally hurt somebody too much.
There's got to be some people I hope we're wanting some PvP. 56%,
56%, but 33% said yes, all allowed.
Okay, see, so there's other people like me that allow it to go out and,
absolutely,
no holds bar.
And a small but not insignificant 11% said only stealing allowed.
See, and I think that at minimum should always be allowed, in my personal opinion.
It's good flavor to me.
I think, that can allow for a lot of interesting moments and dynamics, and plays in more with things like passive perception and insight, and can always kind of create an idea that the players are kind of individuals as well.
Yeah, and there's also a difference, right? Because with stealing allowed, it isn't just about picking someone's pocket. You can put in someone's pocket too.
Oh, yeah. And if you have any stories or any other kind of, experiences that you've had, whether it be negatively or positively about PvP, be sure to send us that comment in YouTube, Discord, find us out on X, but let us know. Give us some more stories that you have of how you guys have experienced PvP at your tables.
Absolutely. And I'd like to give a small shout out to Mr. Valiant on X, who commented, provisionally, it depends on A, the game, B, the story and situation, and C, if the players in question allow it. That kind of thing can lead to some harsh confrontation, and I'd rather everyone be there for a good time. That's a good point, I think.
Right, and I think that really kind of shows that as long as everyone is on the same page and there's not like, a divide, a 50-50 divide, that's really what it comes down to. And so really what we can look at and how you can hopefully create your own interpretation is we can look at some of the pros and cons of having PvP versus not having PvP.
Absolutely.
Because I think that way everyone can have like that informed decision before they walk in, because like I said, everyone kind of has their own view as to what exactly PvP is.
Yeah, so I personally think that one of the pros of PvP is the flavor that it adds to a story. Sometimes it can lead to really funny situations. Accidental PvP is a thing that occurs.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've had a bunch of that, and I think that also goes to show kind of where the dynamic plays on the DM as well, right? Yeah. So like you said, the accidental injury where, a player sets a trap and they word it specifically, but obviously a little too specific, and says, the next person out of here is the one that gets shot, happens to be a player.
Yeah.
Now, do I say, oh, wait, we don't allow PvP? Do I stop the scene and say, oh, no, it magically skips this person and the next bad guy? That's what it knew. The crossbow just knew it was a bad guy.
It just curved around him.
And even though, unfortunately your character was the victim of this trap, I think it also provided more of a dynamic, as it was kind of brought up many times as the story progressed, but also taught a valuable lesson of, hey, setting up booby traps right behind your team isn't necessarily the greatest idea.
Yeah, catching a crossbolt that wasn't even meant for you is kind of...
I mean, they were trying to help. The idea was good. The execution was very standard for D&D.
But that's the funny thing, because later in the campaign, we were reminiscing about the early days and talking about that situation and just having a big old laugh about it, because it was kind of just this funny situation that nobody really anticipated.
Yeah, and I think like the same thing with the accidental can also go on a con side in that, D&D is a very complicated game in its core, right? And not just even mechanically, but in a story. And that there are times where so much stuff can go for the character development or the storyline, and there might be something that maybe a player just doesn't understand or just doesn't realize that they missed something in the backstory, that if they perform this action, it's the ultimate slight. And they just... So it was merely accidental and could provide more of a teaching moment, right? But if the PvP is allowed and the player goes, oh, well, I now have a justification to slay my teammate and just goes at it, it becomes another issue where it's like, hey, maybe that's not always should be an option on the table. So sometimes you're like, well, maybe PvP isn't the best option, because I'd rather have them talk it out than slash it out.
Right. It's a little
and there's
easier.
also ways to have like, friendly duels where it's like, hey, you dishonored my family.
Yeah.
Let's have a duel at dawn. We will sword fight, but obviously first one to drop at 1 HP loses the duel.
Yeah.
There's no intention for anyone to kill each other. In fact, we're gonna make sure we specify non-lethal
damage. Yeah.
Right. And so now you have the PvP slightly, but you also can still have that safety net that that your fellow player isn't just gonna stab you in the back, literally.
Yeah. And then there are times where the PvP is really fitting for the story, but it can cause some big issues at the table.
I mean, you've been right in the middle of one of these in our first campaign.
Yes, my character Alira had hidden something that was a pretty big deal from another player who the character also happened to be dating in the story. So it caused, when she did eventually come forward and confess, it did cause a huge rift, to the point where at the moment we were in a tiny hut. and the
Lemons.
yes, and the person my character lied to rolled the dice to see if their character would freak out or would accept it, and unfortunately, it rolled that he would freak out.
Yeah, I went nuts.
Yes, so not only did he kick me out of the tiny hut, he kicked every single player inside the tiny hut out, and one of them was our cleric, who was super upset at it because she had done nothing wrong.
No one knew what was going on.
Yeah.
In the moment, it was a great moment of storytelling. As a DM, I didn't know what was going on. I legitimately thought the player was just upset. I'm like, this guy's about to storm out of my table. Holy crap.
It was crazy.
It was a great moment of storytelling. And it only was from allowing such things like that.
Really, it did. And it creates such a poignant moment, too, because it was a turning point for them as a couple as well, the characters. So it, there's a space for it in the story, in the play, if you allow it and if you frame it in a good way.
Yeah, and I think another like strong pro for me is also the idea of that this really promotes the idea of player agency, right? So like you saying, it gives you that opportunity for your player to be a real person, which is what I strive for a DM to really create. So that way that, hey, if this is a moment for me, my character might snap, and and you don't have to feel like, well, there's this invisible barrier that says, okay, well, nope, you can do everything, not just this, and this.
Exactly.
Because these people are unique and their plot armor is so strong, you can't get through it no matter what you roll.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of breaks the immersion a little bit. And you obviously don't want players to necessarily play a game with the intention of like, ooh, I'm going to try to kill one of the other teammates.
Yeah.
But if there happen to be a player who wants to play that like smart mouth rogue or something that's constantly doing stuff and then crosses the line finally, what character development doesn't have a situation like that, right? Where you run your mouth until you finally get to someone who puts you in your place and you're like, I almost died because I made a joke, right? And so it's like, so now that character learns and it grows. And the only way you get that is by allowing your players to have this freedom.
Exactly. And so that's a really good aspect. But then you run the issue that perhaps you might get a murder hobo that takes advantage of that and just wants to attack anything in sight.
Kryptonite of player agency, the murder hobo.
So what I would say as a form of advice, I guess, is wait to implement your PvP in your story until you know what kind of characters you're working with, what kind of players you're working with.
Yeah, and I think there comes a lot in that. You want to have that healthy balance. And like you were saying, it really comes down to like knowing your players. And like we always say, session 0. Yeah. Session 0 is
so
key.
Important.
That way you can talk about it and make it one of your major topics.
Absolutely.
All right, what is PvP? How does everyone feel about it? That way everyone already is on the same page. And really what it comes down to, it's like a all or none for me, right? Yeah. Like, so if everyone is like, yeah, I'm good with PvP, cool, we're gonna allow it. Yeah. If one person is like, hey man, it's not for me, then we don't do it. No. Because it's such a tipping moment. You really want to make sure everyone's on board.
Yeah, it's not worth making someone so uncomfortable that they almost don't want to be at the table, that's a little tough and a little mean. So I'd rather just not do it if it's gonna make someone feel like they can't play.
Oh yeah. And like, if you've ever had really like an experience like that, really let us know. Like that really idea of that experiencing that full blown player agency, let us know. Tell us that story of when your character was allowed to feel almost so real. You felt like they were about to hop out the game and start playing it with you.
Yeah. Let us know too, good instances of PvP, bad instances of PvP that you've dealt with. Let us know kind of where your ranges are of what's happened, and let us know using the hashtag couple of nerds on social media. That way we know that you're talking to us.
Yeah. And so like for us, it's like we talk a lot about PvP because we really have had a lot of experiences, both planned out where a player has come to me and asked them beforehand, as well as completely spontaneous moments of crazy chaos that end up providing great moments of storytelling and character development. Like for me, one of the real kind of big ones early in our second campaign was the idea of player on player theft.
Yes.
In that one of our players was this kind of shape-shifting creature, this rogue that was tasked with stealing and finding an object that one of the players supposedly had. Yeah. And so the whole point of this player's introduction was them trying to get close enough to pickpocket And they had talked to me ahead of time that like this was their plan. And so that way they didn't have to say out loud, hey, I'm pickpocketing this guy. This is what I'm stealing.
Right.
It was just more of I'm ready and then I roll.
Yeah.
And so that whole beginning created this whole overstretching dynamic that didn't even get revealed until months into our play, like real game months of play, to where it finally was like, wait a minute, you did steal that. Like, they didn't actually truly know for the longest time where the item technically went.
And how it got back to them, too. It was so strange.
Even though it was done live at the table, no one actually knew what happened until it was actually revealed. To me, without PvP and that concept of allowing that freedom, that event would have never happened. Yeah,
we wouldn't have gotten it. And it was such an important part of the story, too, because it was character growth for two different players, the person who stole the object and the person who was stolen from. So it creates these moments, these sort of opportunities for growth for the characters, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, they choose the wrong thing or the right thing. It really gives the table a sort of flavor, because what's better than having the choice, you know?
Yeah, and I think that really makes for fun gameplay, having kind of that freedom, that agency to know that, you know, hey, I may not want to kill you at this moment, but I want you to know that I can. Yeah. Those serve purposes too. And, you know, PvP isn't just about like attacking a person. You can mess with someone's head. You can make it really difficult for them. Yeah, there's definitely more than just the physical violence aspect of PvP that I think can be really fun. You know, and I think where a lot of it comes to is like, you know, we talk about other games, and like I think both of us have suffered the fate of, you know, playing PvP in various games and having kind of that fear built into us. You know, both of us played League of Legends for the longest time. And if anybody in our listening circle has played League of Legends, you know that it is a fairly brutal game in terms of skill. People want you to be super skilled, especially in ranked. So, you know, it can be extremely stressful to be in a game. Oh, yeah. And the big thing with that, and I think that's why I bring it up, is the prime example is that it's not about the PvP you face against the other team, but within your team. Yeah. Right? And the inner pickings and the banter and the kind of the yelling at each other and the picking each other apart PvP. And I think that's the biggest thing you want to avoid at your table. Yeah. Right? It's that toxic communication. Yeah, it shouldn't come from a malicious place. It should just come from kind of a natural progression of either the story or the dialogue. Within reason. Yeah. Because, you know, there is a lot of that conjecture of it's what my character would do. Right. Right. And so that's a lot of times that excuse of, oh, I'm being this insensitive jerk, but it's what my character would do. Yeah. Okay, well, my character punches insensitive jerks in the face. Prepare for a lot of bludgeoning damage. Exactly. So that's why. And so it kind of creates that safety net check against kind of jerk players that want to create a character that's going to instigate everybody. And if you have no PvP, they kind of make that character under the idea that, well, guess what? Nobody can do anything to me. And since we're starting at level 15, there's no way some guard's going to tell me not to do something, because I'll smote him in 2 turns, you know? So it really becomes that issue of that, you know, who watches the watchmen if not the players themselves? Exactly. You know, sometimes there is something of self-policing in a group, especially if there's a paladin involved, and say a rogue or an assassin. Yeah, you know, it's tough to marry those two and have them work in a group without there being some sort of conflict. I mean, when I was playing my second character, Brenna, she was definitely had moments as a paladin where it was like, I might have to hurt you and you're on my party. Yeah, there were times where it was kind of where I'm sitting back kind of wondering if I'm about to have you guys roll for initiative against each other for some of the instances that happened. And unfortunately, I built Brenna in a way that it was just as soon as she makes the decision that you're guilty, it's done. Oh, yeah. And then there's other times where we've had it kind of go negatively, you know, with players that are trying to instigate. Yeah. With that idea both, and kind of in a sense that they try to instigate both with other players and trying to sick PvP, or excuse me, NPCs on the players as a form of PvP, right? So you walk up to the guard, you go, I'm going to lie to the guard and tell him my buddy over here is a wanted criminal. Right. Wait, you know, in essence now giving them heat and problems. And so in essence, that's another version of PvP where you are intentionally trying to sway the story against another player. And we've had that in our first campaign with two rambunctious kind of murder hobos in training that always were trying to deflect anything towards the innocent players and trying to skirt every issue and not realizing how much chaos that created because here are the players who are trying to play a certain way constantly being accused by their fellow players of the crimes the fellow players are committing.
It was tough,
everyone knows what's going on, but they're trying to sit there and because it's technically a game, trying to lie in front of everyone's faces to get them in trouble
because they could.
And so that's another way why you want to make sure you have this very clear conversation and communication and a mutual respect amongst players. Just like hey, if you're gonna make a smart aleck, you know what happens to smart alex, but you also know no one goes and like blows off the smart alec's head on the first Yo Mama joke. Right? There's stages to everything. And so I think that's really what it comes down to is that understanding of like, hey, we'll take it as like the water kind of warms up as we go and you find kind of that healthy middle for you and your party.
You got to make sure that you understand it. It can't just be all about what you want, especially in a tabletop game, a D&D game. It's a team player sort of game, you want to engage your team sport. So you can't really alienate everybody. You have to have some allies.
So as we look at it, PvP is this way more multifaceted object than just huge. Being I stab my friend. Whether you want to do something like a battle royale where all your players are just made to fight each other or just have kind of like, we have this deep role-playing experience. PvP has a place in every table, in my opinion.
Even if it is just you only allow stealing or, even if you don't allow it at all. Like I said, there are some ways to have PvP where it isn't just simply attacking players. You can mess with people's minds. You can play little games and have fun that way.
And I think that's really what it comes down to, right? It's that communication and coming to a mutual understanding is the most important factor, right? So as long as everyone is on the same page, that's really what matters most. It's when you have this kind of split table of one wants it and the others don't, and then you try to do this mix and match.
That can be tough.
And so you kind of just have to go, okay, it's all or none. Because really at the end of the day, you don't really lose anything like not having PvP.
Not really.
Lost. It's another layer to the onion, as Shrek would say, right? So the idea is that it's there as another flavor, but it's not a requirement in any way to play
not at all.
Any type of tabletop game.
And if you believe that a team should not, have those sorts of conflicts, that is a valid point to have.
I mean, our polls show, 52%, they said, hey,
we don't like it.
Straight up, we don't want it.
It can cause issues. It can cause different frictions at the table that you might not necessarily have had if you don't do PvP.
And so for us, we just like to see kind of what that chaos does. And so we really do. And sometimes it causes a lot of problems, and sometimes it causes great storytelling.
Absolutely.
But we choose to play with that chaotic, kind of beast, and we're willing to see kind of what happens. But it only started because we all came and agreed to it at session 0.
Absolutely. An agreement is the most important. But thank you so much for joining us on today's episode. We really appreciate everyone tuning in and listening. And let us know your own thoughts on the subject of PvP. Give us your experiences, whether good or bad. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to be able to shout you out just like we did with the commenter on X and make sure that we express what the community is telling us as well, too. There are some people who don't agree with PvP, and that's perfectly fine.
And we just want to thank everyone. For us, it's only been 3 months now that we've been recording these, and it feels like it's been in an instant. But we thank everyone that's going out and listening to our podcast and looking at our videos on YouTube.
Thank you so much.
But we just encourage you, please keep doing it for us. Lets us know that there's somebody out there listening. And we appreciate everything you got. But we also remind you, please come join us on our Discord. Come join us on the Extraeus Project Discord. That way you can connect with us a little bit more. Etlink is always drawing on her Sunday night streams.
You can catch her live.
Catch all the new art that might be coming up on Comic Cave. Also, catch some of us streaming various games on Steam. And just come hang out, ask questions, or just find some other people that can just hang out with, whether it's, talking about D&D or just talking about the latest anime or video game.
Our players are also hanging out on the Discord every now and then, and you can always catch them and ask questions.
But we thank you all once again for joining us, and hopefully for many more episodes of Couple of Nerds.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and have a good night. And that concludes today's journey through the realm of Couple of Nerds. We hope you had a blast exploring the intricate world of Extraeus. Don't miss out on the visual extravaganza over at our YouTube page at Couple of Nerds Podcast. It's where the magic comes to life with exclusive video segments, art previews, and a peek behind the curtain.
Dive deeper into our adventures by visiting DnDWifeStories.com, your haven for all our podcast transcripts and a treasure trove of content dedicated to the captivating universe of Extraeus.
Your unwavering support is our greatest treasure. Take a moment to weave your thoughts into a review and hit that subscribe button for an enchanting journey with Couple of Nerds.
Join us beyond the podcast in the Extraeus Project Discord. Connect with us, the creators, and even the travelers themselves. Witness the magic unfold in live drawing streams, game alongside us, and step into our digital tavern, the Bard's Haven. Share your stories and characters with fellow adventurers. Visit DnDWifeStories.com for the link to join our vibrant community.
Stay tuned for more tales, more laughs, and more insight into the world of tabletop gaming. Until then, may your dice be kind, your campaigns epic, and your adventures legendary.